conferences as we were speaking, and I'm always open to everybody's input on what you thought about this conference or previous conferences and how they compared, and what the subject matter is. We're looking for subject matter for next year. This one was a little more techy than I think all our previous years, as it being very security oriented, but that was heavily because people were talking a lot about what was going on in the public sector with fear of security and how it was impacting people's personal lives, more than just like banking and things, but really we were hearing a lot from libraries and students where what things were showing up on screens for kids a lot of times. So that kind of drove a lot of what's going on here today. So again, I encourage anybody to stop by and talk to me. I'm Danny Moskovitz, sorry. I forgot who I was introducing. And I've worked volunteering with a lot of different school systems around the area. And it's a volunteer thing I do, even though I'm a consultant that does business and technology advisory services all around really the world. But I like to give back to the community. I grew up in Westchester, in the New York, and Connecticut area. So I'm always volunteering projects and around to help work. And this is one of the great programs, I think, in the area. I also work with BOCES in New York, which is kind of the same version of CEN for New York. So again, I encourage anybody to reach out to me or anybody here. So today we have speaking first Nate, and he's from GraVoc. They do a lot of different things in the Connecticut and Massachusetts area for security. And he can give you more of his background and why he can be a great speaker.
Yeah, so I'm Vice President of Information Security and IT. Basically, the IT got added on after the fact. It's usually the other way around. But when there's particularly large call volume at our company, we're a technology consulting firm, particularly large volume of IT support calls that come in, I go to my door and I actually cover up the IT part with update. So I am pretty security focused. That's where I started. I actually went to school down the street here at Trinity College, but nothing to do with networks or security or anything like that. I was a humanities guy that kind of fell ASS backwards into the security field. So, and that's partly because GraVoc is a family-owned and operated technology consulting firm. So we're just north of Boston, and we do a bunch of different things related to business consulting with technology. And so today we're talking about an introduction to network security, and I hate to say, but I'm probably going to talk about all the factors around the network, but not actually talk about the network itself. I think Matt's going to take care of that piece where you're talking about securing your own internal environments. I'm going to tell you about some of the factors that play into the reasons why we need to think about this more often than maybe we once had. So my presentation is going to be largely about cybersecurity events, the cybercrime landscape, what goes on in the limelight, but also behind the scenes that leads to some of these major events that we see. Talk about threats and trends, and obviously question and answer. That doesn't have to be saved to the end, though. If you do have a question, feel free to stop me at any time. Try to keep it to a half hour and stay nice in the sandbox. So, notable breaches in 2016 and 2017 is the next slide. This isn't meant to be a wall of shame. This is strictly just to show that it's no longer financial institutions and healthcare organizations that need to think about cybersecurity now. As you can see, cyber attacks are pretty much industry agnostic at this point. You look at any of the companies on here and they just span pretty much any industry imaginable. So I put to date here because I'm sure there's some going on right now that we don't really know about. So the cybersecurity space is interesting because the attacks that we hear, one study says that the attacks that we hear about and that make it to the news only represent about 10% of the actual activity, and the other 90% below the surface. If you ever did the iceberg theory in some of your literature courses or creative writing courses, but that's essentially what we're looking at here is about 10% of what's actually going on. And so the cybercrime landscape is huge. So according to a recent study by Juniper, the global cybercrime cost projected for 2019 could reach about $2 trillion. And so that's not just funds being stolen, that's all the expenses associated with the breach. So the notification, you know, the forensics, the incident response, anything related to essentially a breach occurring is figured into this number. And to put this number in context, the first three are relatively serious, and the last one's just me tongue-in-cheek, being a bitter, you know, person who has lots of student loans. But it's a lot of money, obviously. And so, so where is some of this activity happening? What's going on? So the sub-layer of the internet that's called Tor, or the dark web, or Silk Road, or, you know, has all sorts of names. There's an underground economy that is actually driving a lot of these breaches to occur. You know, and some are for blackmail purposes and vendetta and hacktivism, and there's a lot of different reasons that motivate attacks. We just heard about nation states. But there's a whole economy around stolen information and what you can sell it for. So this is just, you know, a general figure, and this scale slides from time to time. It's like any other economy where values go up and down. This is on average what you get for a stolen credit card. And so there's different values associated with credit cards that have been stolen before versus ones that are newly stolen. And ones with the full amount of information or fulls are the highest value, and that's $30 about, give or take, right now. So this is what it looks like when you're purchasing stolen credit cards on the dark web. Looks familiar because it looks like any e-commerce site. You basically just check off the bins that you want and check out over there, and you're free to create that card and use it until it gets hot carded and you have to buy more. Or, you know, you can try your best to make as many purchases as fast as possible before it gets detected. Access to compromised websites. So there's websites out there that are already compromised. People running the websites most likely don't know it, but access to those sites is being bought and sold by, you know, hackers, cybercrime syndicates, whoever. And, you know, again, there's a sliding scale depending on the type of access. So just to uphold the stereotype of all things hacking being Russian, this is a Russian site. And so these are the names of the websites that are compromised, the dollar value associated with them. Again, point, click, check out, you have access to that site. Fraud tutorials, I find this one kind of comical because, you know, there's people that want to commit fraud and don't know how to. And so there's fraud tutorials online on the dark web that basically walk you through step by step. And again, a little bit tongue-in-cheek depending on the amount of pretty pictures. That's not really true. I mean, it's just the value that they perceive the information to have. So it's very sophisticated fraud. I mean, obviously, you pay more money to learn that. So what am I trying to point at here? I'm basically trying to point at the fact that cybercrime is organized. It's, you know, I think a lot of times on TV and in the movies, it's kind of done disservice of showing the guy in the hoodie in his mom's basement. I think there was a Bruce Willis movie that had a character like that. And, you know, just hacking for the sake of hacking, this kind of recluse type. It's not. It's an industry, and so much so and so prominent of an industry that traditional crime families have gotten into it as a revenue-generating framework for their syndicate, if you will. And so they create all sorts of revenue-generating frameworks, much like a regular company would. They pick a vertical in some instances. They assign roles to members and share profits based on the role. So you're higher up, you get more. You're lower down on the train, you get less. So generally, I mean, these lay out all different ways, but these are the different roles and models and different assignments inside of a group. You typically have your leader, your malware, and rootkit developers who work hand in hand because rootkits hide the presence of malware. People who develop exploits that basically use what is gained from malware in terms of access to be able to then hack into somewhere, which is the hacker's role, kind of pulling it all together. So the verticals can be all over the map. There's syndicates that specialize in creating botnets, which is just a series of compromised machines, and they'll actually rent those botnets out to other hackers. So you got a huge botnet that you've created, and somebody says, I want to attack XYZ. I'll rent this botnet out. You can rent it out hourly, daily, monthly, weekly, however you choose. Same with development of malware, and then hackers for hire who essentially are freelancers, if you will. The one that's most interesting to me is the access to corporate networks, because there are people out there who have compromised networks of major companies that have sat on the knowledge of that access. And what they do is they sell it to the highest bidder. So they communicate out on the dark web and say, listen, I have access to such and such company. However, I don't want to go forward with attacking that company. Too much liability for me. But if you want to, I'll sell you kind of the intellectual property, if you will, for a certain amount of money, and you can do with it whatever you choose. And so that happens relatively frequently on the dark web. So threats and trends. This is just a quick infographic. I'm sure the numbers are even stale at this point, just because, again, this is changing all the time with what happens on the internet every 60 seconds. And so some of the ones are hard to see, but just to kind of highlight some of the figures, Amazon is not doing too bad with $83,000 in ranking sales. I'd take that for a revenue stream. Some of the other ones, like the number of tweets, 278,000 tweets a day. It's just crazy. And so, most people see this and go, oh, wow, lots of people use the internet. Well, when you're in the security space, you're like, wow, this is a lot of opportunities for things to go terribly wrong and off the rails. It's just that's kind of the way that you look at it. It's opportunity for hackers to essentially do what they designed to do. And so, what are the types of things, the threats that are emerging that are things that can go wrong? I highlight social engineering first because in everything that we do in terms of red team testing, you kind of have red team, which is our offensive side, blue team, which is more our defensive side. The offensive side is really all about penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, essentially hacking, ethical hacking, with the quotes around ethical, depending on the time of day. So why do I highlight social engineering first? Because by and large, when we do these exercises, the way that we're getting in is through people. It's not really a weakness. And so you have to look at people as an extension of the network, I guess is what I'm saying. A lot of times people look at network security in a bubble. It's like, how many cool technologies can we put in place to stop all these bad things that happen? But a lot of times it's the people that are controlling those controls or not configuring them appropriately or bypassing them in some way that allow an attack to happen. And so some of the major breaches you hear about, like Anthem, JP Morgan Chase, Target, all the major ones all had some element of social engineering that happened to allow that attack to transform. So this is just kind of a social engineering, cycle, if you will. I call it the primary. Mark Zuckerberg's term is information age. He says we're living in the information age, and I attribute social engineering as the primary threat of the information age because there's just so much information for attackers to use against you that either you put out there or somebody else puts out there for you. And so this is just a general cycle of how social engineering attack occurs. And there's really three major categories for social engineering. The digital, which most everybody is familiar with, the phishing emails, you know, the Nigerian princes that want to give you their money and things like that. Farming, which is just a way of, you know, pulling people to their bogus websites. In person, which is just as effective, impersonation, tailgating, baiting. So, you know, some of the exercises we do, we'll hang out by the door where we know everybody goes out to take a cigarette break, or we'll, you know, be carrying a really heavy box or what looks to be like a really heavy box and have people actually open the door for you into the back office area. So there's a lot of things you can do in person that are very effective. And then once you get in, I mean, you kind of have your options from there. And the phone, which is, I think, the least frequent, but I mean, I see them, and we have to deal with them in the incident response side of our business, which is like phishing and smishing, they call it, which is just basically phishing through text messaging. So why is it so effective? 3 reasons, there's probably more. Human nature, most social engineers play on emotion. So one of the worst ones I've seen, you know, being in the Boston area in the last couple of years, well, almost, I think it's 5 years ago now, actually, the Boston Marathon bombing. And so the one fund was, you know, created out of that event, and there were just so many, in our area, we were dealing with so many of these fake calls to action from the one fund, stealing funds from people who thought that they were donating to common good. Emotion is number 1. Apparently we have 2 number 1s. We'll go with that. We selectively care about privacy. You think about HIPAA and the way that our health information is protected, and then you think about the way people use social media. You can see that we're kind of selective about what we care about in terms of broadcasting for information versus what we consider to be private. And your information is already out there in large regard because of other people, companies, the government, whoever sharing it out there, or you sharing it out there and not really realizing how much you're sharing. So I just put a little example up here. You know, somebody on vacation that decides to post on Facebook that they're having a really good time, a couple hashtags, South Africa, Winelands, and I added a few of my own, scam my grandparents, and rob my house. So the one we see all the time on Facebook is kids who are studying abroad that then their grandparents get a call that says they've been detained in another country, they need to pay this amount of money, and it's always Western Union somehow. It's like the global currency that we all use. So again, this is sharing information, which is, you know, benign and relatively benign in the general context of things. But if you think about it from a hacker's perspective, it's opportunity. Phishing, whaling, wire fraud. So essentially, we deal with a lot of incident response and forensics cases. And a lot of times, there are financial institutions that are being attacked. A new level of this is, well, the financial institutions kind of have some of this figured out, so why don't we attack their customers? And so a lot more of the phishing and the call to action has been directed at the business, a lot of times business customers of these banks. And so what will happen is they'll find out who the controller is in the company and who moves the money around, find out when the CEO is going to be out of office or is maybe in South Africa, and you know, create an email that looks very legitimate sent to the controller saying wire this amount of money to this company, and away we go. So the financial institutions have a really tough time detecting this because the request is actually made by the legitimate signatory on the account because they've been tricked. So when they do their callback procedure, they get the person that's, you know, the legitimate, you know, signatory or authorized person on the phone. And so this was one we did a couple of years ago now, where Debbie, who's the controller of the company, was emailed by Lee, who's the CEO of the company, supposedly emailed by Lee to wire out about $105,000 for admin services. And so there were two parts to this investigation. One was, who the heck is Lee with 3 E's, because the Lee that we know is 2 E's. And then again, to hold up the stereotype, that address that it actually came from was from the Russian-Chinese border. And we had to see if by opening this nice PDF with the wire instructions, they actually opened up their network to either a backdoor or some sort of compromise on the network level. Fortunately, these hackers were over 2 because they actually didn't put anything in the PDF, and if they did, it didn't really successfully download. But number 2 was because it was a foreign wire, the bank stopped it because they issued a stop payment. It takes an extra day to process. In that time, Debbie was actually able to communicate with Lee and determine that this was fraudulent. They issued a stop payment. But had it been domestic, like a lot of times there'll be a domestic bot before it goes outside the U.S. Had that been the case, it most likely would have been gone. So, I'm not even going to mention the extreme lack of internal procedure for wiring money at that particular company when it only takes an email of that nature for $105,000. This is an interesting website, and I guess I have been honed. This is one of my email addresses. But this is just a site that shows you, has your email been compromised? And the reason I show this is that this is, if you show up on this list, there's a chance that a large majority of people do, because obviously these are 2 major companies that hold your email data in some fashion. Chances are you've been added to a lot of spam lists because this information is shared and spam lists are created, and then you're kind of at the mercy of how many spam people pick it up and use it. Ryan Krebs wrote an interesting book, I think 2 years ago now, called Spam Nation, and it talks about kind of how spam grew from being like, the bogus Viagra advertisements to this massive industry. So he talks about a lot of the same stuff I'm talking about in that book. It's pretty good. Ransomware, malware. So you'll see out probably on the floor some of the next-gen malware companies or next-gen antivirus companies. And that's because of this number in the middle of the screen here. And so conservative estimates say about 250,000. Less conservative ones say about 900,000 new pieces of malware a day. There's no antivirus on the planet that's going to stop all of this. And so the next gen guys look at behavior versus signatures, and that's how they, that's the market. They're downstream from malware. Ransomware I have bolded here because we deal with ransomware on a weekly basis at this point, where files are being encrypted, you have to pay a ransom. It takes a while to fund the digital wallet and the digital currency that you need to pay that ransom. Bitcoin is still the leader in that, but in order to set up like a Coinbase wallet, you need, sometimes 2 weeks for them to allow you to put the amount of money that they're asking for. So right now, 1 Bitcoin is about $1,200, and so they'll ask for free Bitcoin, and basically you're paying up for $4 grand, $3,500, $4 grand, to get your information back. We've paid the ransom on a number of cases because their backups were terrible and they didn't have offsite backup, and just that was their only option. But the way that malware is created now is that they stack up 10 of the top selling malware products, and they run their new malware through that, the gauntlet, I guess. And if it passes 6 or 7 out of 10, it goes out and they start using it in the wild, so to speak, because they know that they have a 60 to 70% success rate against most users. Very good. So this is a traditional crypto wall, crypto locker screen. We've seen too many of these screens, in my opinion. Skimming devices. So it used to be just ATMs, now it's gas pumps, and in some instances they're swapping out entire point of sale units while the person behind the counter isn't looking. They turn to get something. They literally plug in a fake POS unit that communicates back to their server versus the actual clearinghouse. They're getting more sophisticated. I've seen ones that are, tiny, and they have ones for pin and chip too. So everybody thought with EMV we would be much more secure from some of the card fraud, but they actually have what's called shimmers, where they literally shim a device over the chip reader and read the chip as it comes in, and then figure out the handshake to be able to get the rest of the data that they need. And so these are just a couple of examples of where they typically end up. The newest level is really not going in front of an ATM or a gas pump at all. It's actually going to the wire and stealing the connection before it goes into the wall. And so, I am the guy who's like shaking the gas pump before I put my credit card in there. And I've got a few looks for that, but they're everywhere. Because not only do we see it for our non-financial institution clients, but we see it in the fraud numbers for the financial institutions. It's just the amount of skimming cases that they deal with annually is crazy. So this is just to show how close it is to the actual unit. I mean, it literally looks almost the same. If you didn't see the little line here versus here, it's almost impossible to tell. Traditional key overlay. So lots of doom and gloom. Kind of rushed through most of it because I wanted to leave time for questions. But what can we do? And how can we better secure networks against these types of attacks? One is training and this one I have 1, 2, and 3. One is training and education. Again, you have to look at the end users, the students, the educators, whoever, as an extension of your network. And so anything behavior-wise that they do that's a bad habit is going to somehow adversely affect your network. So training and education is huge. Again, social engineering being such a big, prominent threat, it starts with people in terms of securing your network, in my opinion. And investing in all 3 phases of information security. So traditionally, as companies and as a culture, we think of security as, the gate around or the walls around a castle, I guess you could say. So we focus all of our attention on protection and don't really care about detecting when we have been breached and then responding to it because we can't detect it. What companies are starting to do is take more of their investment in security and push it down to those other 2 areas. So at one point, we were investing 80% of our security budget at the perimeter. And that has since changed with the advent of security information event management and some of the things that have been focused on in the last couple of years through this cybersecurity framework. But essentially focusing on the detection and the response. It's still bad. When a company is hacked, it takes them on average between 180 to 200 days to detect the fact that they've been breached. So you're talking about 6 months of whoever got inside the network having time to kind of manipulate and do what they will. And the third and final piece is test, and it's easy for me to say because we're a consulting firm that does security testing, right? Test and don't be afraid to fail. I meet a lot of business owners that are like, well, we're not ready for a test. It's like, well, if you're not ready now, you're never going to be ready for a test because the testing and finding out what the problem is really the only way you're going to find a solution to it. So, and that extends to your end users as well. There's a big, it's always a tough decision to do your first social engineering test because you're essentially, turning an independent third party like us onto your user base. And it's tough because you don't want people to feel like they've been tricked, like they've been duped. But chances are it's happening already to them from external forces, so you might as well know what your exposure is. So I'm talking here about not only end user testing, but testing the network as well. Are there any questions?
I have a 17-year-old son
Mm-hmm.
who plays online all day long.
Yep.
And one of the things that his friends and he do to each other all the time is they DDoS each other.
Mm-hmm.
They go on, they go on some website somewhere and they buy, here's 5 minutes of DDoSing for this amount of bandwidth and this amount of money.
Yep.
It's cheap. It's
Yep.
like $1.
Yeah.
And I'm always telling how illegal this is.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what kinds of, are there agencies you can report this to? What can be done about these? I'm sure they're all posted in countries that don't care to enforce this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what makes it tough.
Yeah.
There's like nothing close to international law. And so you can report them, and if enough cases are reported, they could technically be blocked or added to blacklists for common firewalls, and you have firewalls built into your routers sometimes. That's one avenue, but it's really tough because there's a ton of sites out there, and it is dirt cheap. I mean, and that scales too to the size of companies and the DDoS attacks that happen in companies as well. Literally, it's acting as a service, and for next to nothing, you can rent a huge botnet that can take over or take down the likes of AWS, the Meraki botnet.
So I'm just curious, are your son and his friends giving them each other's IP address? How do your son's friends know what your catering room's IP address is to do those?
If you're connected to a game server,
You know, listen, I don't know, I don't think.
That part is a lot of times those aren't static IPs. Adverse attacks of DDoS attacks on unsuspecting users.
oh yeah, we'll take our whole neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah, because they'll attack a whole block sometimes. Yeah.
What's the most effective against ransomware?
Against ransomware, in terms of not paying it or in terms of not getting it. The most effective against ransomware in terms of not getting it is to have something additional to antivirus that looks at machine state behavior. So whether that be a next-gen product or whether that be something as simple as what Microsoft built in the Advanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit, Emmet. It's essentially a downstream product that looks at things like PowerShell scripts and things that could potentially be anomalous on the machine. Yeah. It looks at behavior. The key concept is looking at behavior versus looking at signatures. So there's not going to be a signature for every 900,000 piece of new malware a day, but there's going to be behaviors associated with that malware that allow you to detect it. In terms of not paying it, it's having, first of all, good backups in terms of on-site and off-site, which was the big failure for a lot of the ones that paid it. But also in a company layer network, having not a flat network and basically having some sort of physical or logical segregation inside your network so that you have to hop over different layers to get to either an admin level network where the backups are happening or at least restricting certain shares to certain groups. So it's kind of a Right, yeah. Yep.
Are you able to comment a little bit about the ransomware detection that's built into the Kaspersky system?
Yes, I mean, it's similar to a lot of the products we see coming out there. I mean, Malwarebytes has one too. There's a lot of companies that have ransomware related. So when they see an encryption process starting to happen, it stops the process. They all work relatively the same. But Kaspersky, like a lot of companies, is kind of integrating more into what they traditionally packaged as antivirus and now calling it endpoint protection because it does a lot more than just look for viruses, like the ransomware detection, but also data loss prevention where you're restricting, what can move on and off the computer, and encryption at the file level as well as the machine. But I mean, Kaspersky in general is obviously one of the leaders that I was talking about in terms of the antivirus endpoint space. They might have ties to Russia though, so I don't know how it makes
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you very much for your time.
So our next speaker is going to continue on the thought process of the security and what to prevent. Matt Schaner, he's a specialist for Meraki products for CIsco, and he's going to go Security Beyond. He can give you a little more insight into who he is and why he's here.
It's a good intro. I'll take that. Well, one other thing. You guys can't all hear that, right? It's super quiet. All right. I'm just going to say it out loud. I haven't memorized it. I'm going to make it up.
You just press the microphone down here.
So it's coming out of the projector. Maybe I can hold the projector. Let's see.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Active.
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicard, said to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO. So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep. Hey, this is Rashid in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't hear you. What's the way to the office? Something's going on with our file service.
Karen and HR, our benefits dashboard thing was really slow. We're getting calls from users on it.
Can you call me? Get this. Can you call me? Yeah.
Apparently there's a malware attack targeting our
It's
main
ransomware. They're holding us hostage. We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That would take days.
We need this fixed now. Hey, we don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do you know that they'll...
Hey, put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now. Okay, it's done. I have the decrypt key.
Mark, we have a into trouble. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicards is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The Nasdaq closed lower today, led by Qualicards, which was down 14% on news that the recent data breach may be far worse. The company
stock
originally
fell to a new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hannon is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's out of my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
Should I just like drop the mic? Nope. It's a good video, right? Yeah, it's my favorite video. That's why I played it. So with that scary video, my name is Matt Schaner. I am the product sales specialist for CIsco Meraki, covering a whole bunch of different things at CIsco. The session, or this part of the session, I'm going to move through these slides pretty quickly because I don't think that's the important part. I think there's a better conversation to be had. Security Beyond the Firewall. So what you guys just saw, right, was a pretty typical malware attack. It looked like it came from someone internal. They downloaded something. You know, that didn't seem so hard to do, right? That seemed like a pretty easy thing. And we run these audits internally at CIsco pretty often, where we get emails from UPS that a package was delivered to the office. We have to click a tracking link or something like that. And then when you click it, it says like, hey, you should know better. We don't send like this. And we get reports about how many people at CIsco click these and things like that. So running these types of audits are incredibly important, as these guys know. We like to think about security beyond just the firewall as well. And to the point earlier, we spend a lot of time investing in the firewall. We spend a lot of time making sure that we are secure from a firewall aspect, and then we leave the doors unlocked, right? Or we prop a cinder block into an exit door so that someone can go take a smoke break and don't have to badge back in and walk around the building. There's a very large city that I work with who was very concerned about cloud networking. So Meraki is a cloud networking company. We do, there's a few in the room who use Meraki products today. We have security with SourceFire and all these different components. And they were really concerned about cloud security. And their big gripe was, we don't know what you guys have in your data center. We don't control what you have. We know what we have. We know that we're secure. I asked them a couple of really simple questions. The first question was, how often do you update the firmware on your switches? And the answer was never, right? Everyone in this room is like, it's a huge pain. I never go around and deal with firmware on my switches. You can go online right now and see how many vulnerabilities have been listed in past firmwares, just from the past 2 years or so. If you're running switches that are 7 or 8 years old, and you haven't updated the firmware, what stops anyone from walking in and sitting down in the main office waiting to pick up their kid, plugging into a jack that they saw a phone plugged into, and trying to take those switches over and get in that way, right? It's not that hard to do, actually. That was my first one. But my second point was, the meeting that I was having was on the 4th floor of a government building. It required me to sign in with an ID, which I could have just faked. And in that floor that I was on was an IT closet with the door propped open, because the cooling system had failed. So they opened the door up to make sure that the equipment could cool on. And before I had the meeting, I saw that door. I walked in, I put my business card on the router, and I went back to the meeting. We had the conversation. And I said, you realize that it required pretty much nothing for me to walk into this building. And I left a business card. I had access to all the equipment in that stack. I left a business card in that stack just to make a point. Which is, if you don't think security holistically, you're not really secure at all. So I put a big lock on a glass door. Right? The lock looks really impressive. It's bulletproof and blah, blah, blah. But if the door is made of glass, well, who cares, right? So there's a few things that we'll talk about today. We'll address some of the questions people had earlier about how do you protect against ransomware. What else can you do? One of the big things that CIsco is known for, especially in the SourceFire acquisition space, which is an acquisition we made a few years ago, is retrospective malware detection. And to the point earlier, we don't always know that things are viruses when we download them, right? If it's something that's brand new and just came out, we as in the security industry are only as good as what we can see, right, or what we know. So the hope is when you get a group like Kaspersky or like Cisco or et cetera, that they see enough stuff out there that you're going to be pretty protected. When you get a smaller sort of up-and-coming firewall company, sometimes their software looks really good, but think about what's feeding into that mechanism, right? How many Cisco customers are out there? How many Kaspersky customers are out there? How many SourceFire customers are feeding their data back into the database to make sure that everyone's protected? If this is a $5 million a year firewall company, how many customers are feeding into this machine? A couple of thousand versus hundreds of thousands or millions? There's things to consider when you're thinking about security. In our own dashboard, I'll walk around a little bit. In our own dashboard in Meraki headquarters, the #1 device listed for threats. Take a guess what type of device it is. #1 device listed for most amount of threats that our firewall blocks. Cell phones. What specifically? iPhone. Right? iPhone. Right? Who thinks iPhone is an insecure device? Right? It's Apple. But here's what happens, right? I learned how to work tech companies. We get a lot of smart folks. They learn how to jailbreak their iPhone. They get a free wallpaper app, right? Some cool thing, right? And it's ransomware, right? It's a ransomware app that they downloaded from an unapproved store, hasn't been checked. They download it on their phone and they get free wallpaper. So they go, cool, it worked. Done, right? So if you allow a BYOD environment, right? You even use Active Directory. You use Radius. You use devices to make sure that people aren't logging in that aren't supposed to be. Well, what if those people have jailbroken their phones and you're allowing them on the network and you're not doing MAC on mobile devices because it's too tough to do or it's too expensive, whatever it is. And now you've got devices on the network authenticated that you've allowed that have malware on them. Every single one of you in this room might have that happening right now, and hopefully nothing has happened. But it's a lot less fun to spend money after something happened and try to fix it than it is to spend money before something happened and try to fix it. And this is something that, especially in Connecticut, especially folks that are connected to CEN, have experienced. We've had a number of customers in Connecticut that have had ransomware attacks that made it through. And some folks are saying, oh, CEN, CEN's got to block this stuff, but it's not CEN, right? It's kids, it's students that are coming in, authenticating to the network, and we're allowing them to. And they have these jailbroken devices, or they have these rooted devices. We don't realize what we're allowing through. Does that all make sense? Am I scaring the shit out of everybody here? All right, cool. Good job. And before we go any deeper, any questions for me? Any questions about the video you saw? Any questions in general? I myself answer. All right, so let's run through some of this stuff really quick. Skip that. So next generation content filtering. We often talk about this as keeping users from hurting themselves, right? Making sure that users don't get to websites that look innocent. And it's either based on content or based on malware or based on known sites that aren't secured properly. But why retrospection is so important? So to my point earlier when we talked about feeding into this thing, at CIsco it's called the Talos engine that feeds into all of these devices and reports on what's out there. The reason why retrospection is so important is you may have already downloaded something that the firewall didn't catch. And then the firewall updates its rules and it sees that it's supposed to be blocking this new piece of malware and it stops new ones from coming in. But to the point earlier, you don't even know that it's already inside, right? It's already in the network now. It doesn't help us that I got the update an hour after it came in. So what retrospection does is it looks at everything you've already downloaded, and then it gives you alerts and says, hey, the thing that we were trying to block now that we didn't know about 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago, you already downloaded it. And it gives you a pop that says, hey, you might want to check out these clients. You might want to look into what the software was, who downloaded it, how far it spread. Go and isolate them now. Don't wait until you find out later that someone picks up the phone. That alerting mechanism is really important. It's important for you to know that these things happen and that you're not getting false alerts. You're not getting tons of alerts every day. Like I do in my inbox, I've got a folder with 30 emails in it and I never check it because I get false alerts all day, so I just ignore it. So making sure that you're getting the right information. Intrusion detection and prevention, one of the easiest things you can do that we build into most of the SourceFire appliances is country blocking. Blocking entire IP segments on the internet, right? My school is not doing an exchange program with North Korea. And there's no reason I should be broadcasting data to North Korea. Block the country, right? Block Russia. Block any country where we don't think that we're doing business with. And then wait for someone to say like, hey, we're using this app that uses some site in the Ukraine, can you turn it back on? Sure, now that I know about it, I can really lock it down and make sure that I'm doing it safely. Country blocking is big for that. And social engineering through rate limiting. So I'm sure all of you are experiencing this. You block something like Facebook, right, for your students. You flat out block it. What's the first thing that students do? Proxy, right? You get right around it. Now, if you make it really slow, though, you don't really typically think like, oh, if it's really slow, it must be, the internet just sucks, right? That's what students say, the internet just sucks. So part of this social engineering by rate limiting, taking websites that students want to get to and not flat out denying them. If they can't get to Netflix, they will figure out a way to get to Netflix. But if you make Netflix really slow, that it's almost unwatchable, students don't really think like, oh, they must be doing traffic shaping on the network. That's usually not their thought process. They just assume it's being blocked. So what we've done at many of the schools that are in this room is we just rate limit that stuff down to 50K. Right? It's so slow that they could watch Game of Thrones, but it's going to take 4 hours to load the opening sequence. So it's not worth it. So then they jump off of it. It's a very simple way to do a little bit of social engineering that can really go a long way. The only downside is I got to look all the way back here. This is good. This is what I need. NAC and BYOD. So how many in this room are not using MDM today? So if you're not using, there's two of you, don't listen to that. MDM, if you're not using MDM today, mobile device management or some sort of enterprise device management. All right, 3 of you guys. You guys should all get together after. MDM is an incredibly important thing for a few reasons. So one, devices that you own, you can make sure are not being taken home and jailbroken or rooted. Even with iOS 10, all the security that's built in, there's the old quote, right? Man can build it, man can hack it. And students will just immediately go home and Google, like, how do I get around my school's content filter, right? How do I get around, MDM on my school's device? So you can use this in a couple different ways. You can use MDM to authenticate a client, so that clients have to have MDM installed. It's very similar to the way NAC used to be. You had to have antivirus installed before you could join. Except now you can look at Surface tablets, and you can look at Chromebooks, and you can look at all sorts of devices that NAC, traditional NAC doesn't really check for. Right? So you can force users to have this thing downloaded and installed, checking. And then you can create policies around what happens if the user violates it. If a user has a jailbroken iPhone, do I kick them off the network entirely, or do I allow them to segment them to part of the network that doesn't have access to other things? If they give a teacher or a facility, faculty member a device and they download Tinder on it, because why not? Unless you're married, right? But why not? The point being that you can say something like, I'm not gonna kick this teacher off the network completely. They still need to do stuff, but maybe I'm gonna redirect them to a screen that says, hey, like, you've got some inappropriate stuff in your device. We're tracking it. Make sure you remove it. And just let people know that they're being, not that they're being watched, in this eagle eye concept, but that we're aware, that the school is aware that we have to protect ourselves, we have to protect others, and this is the process that we're going to do. So MDM is really important for things like that. You can also enforce PIN codes, you can enforce passwords, require things like screen lock, right? So any device that you hand out should automatically lock after a certain amount of time, so on and so forth. Next generation video surveillance. So I snuck this in here just because I love video surveillance. I think it's super cool. This is an important part, though, right? It's an important part of the security architecture overall. It's important to know who's coming and going, who's entering the building. If it turns out that you had a breach internally and someone says, show me the video of that entrance or that exit door so I can see who was coming in and messing around with the network, or what students tried to sneak in over the summer to make a change. And you say, oh, we didn't put a camera back there, so it's worth a few $100 investment to make sure that doors and entrances and exits, at the very least, are things that are covered. We're seeing a huge uptick in video surveillance in IDFs and NDFs and in data centers, in places where traditionally we weren't thinking about putting video. But it's become so inexpensive now that it seems silly not to. Just throw one extra camera up somewhere to make sure that no one's mucking around and unplugging stuff, or the science teacher that begged for access to something isn't sneaking in the closet and making a change for their own use, which happens. For more information on this kind of stuff, you can go to Meraki.com/MX or Meraki.com/SM for video surveillance, Meraki.com/MV, or just Meraki.com and click your way through it. I think that there's a lot of good information in there to build out. So to prove my point, I'm gonna choose a volunteer that knows I'm coming for him. Can I borrow your wallet first, just 1 second? Way too easy. All right. But that's my point, right? My point is it's too easy, right? You trust someone because we know each other. You trust someone, you're very willing to give information. We all watched that video. I didn't even pick on you, but we all just watched that video, right? You see something from someone that you trust, you see a request, and you just assume it's fine. How many of you have gotten invites to a social media site that wasn't LinkedIn but looked like something like LinkedIn? There's like a bunch of them out there trying to compete with LinkedIn. And some of them are legitimate, right? But not all of them. And you see a request from someone you know that says, hey, join this social media site, join this business site, one of your colleagues has just requested that you join it. And you go, I'm cutting edge, I'm cool, I'm with it, I want to join this thing with everybody else. And you go through the process. And all that website did was just query your Facebook, see your friends of friends, grab that image automatically, throw it in an email, and send it to you. Pretty straightforward, right? It's a lot easier, unfortunately, to be hacked than we all think. It's just a quick time check. How much time do we go? Beautiful, perfect. So the only other thing that I really wanted to go over with you guys is to get some feedback from the room. So you just heard a lot of good information about security, you heard information about MDM, you saw a really cool video. So what, right? What's everyone's next step? What are your plans when you go back to your various schools and organizations and whatnot? My recommendation, first thing first, is do a security audit. Make sure that all the things that we've just discussed are actually taking place. Don't just take this information and say, like, wow, what a really cool video. I'm going to show that to somebody else, and then forget that we just had this whole conversation. But really make an effort to make sure that if you've got a firewall in place, that it's up to date. If you've got hardware that's out there, that ports are locked down properly, that devices are locked down properly, that information is not being shared with students. I think my favorite one, and I've experienced this way too many times, hey, do you lock down your Wi-Fi? Yeah, we've got a password on it. Yeah, cool. What's the password? It's on the whiteboard in the other room. Just go read it. It's not security, right? That spends too quickly. It fans out too quickly. So if you don't have best practices like that installed, you don't have things like proper radius or authentication, or you're not using MDM properly, or you haven't segmented your BYOD network properly, and if these words don't mean anything to you, reach out to, it doesn't have to be CIsco, whoever your manufacturer is, reach out to them and say, hey, can you get on the phone and help me do a security audit? Or reach out to one of the many vendors that we have in Connecticut that resell technology and ask them, hey, can we have a bigger conversation around security? Can we make sure that all of these things are the way that they should be? Because more often than not, they aren't. Right? We find that there's one or two little spots that we weren't thinking of. And getting back to one of my points before, don't be afraid to ask for money for security. What I mean by that is, it's very hard to cut a check for new security when you just bought something 6 years ago and it's still in its usable lifetime, blah, blah, blah. It's much more expensive to have to send Bitcoin to someone when they hack your network or they put ransomware on. How many people in this room have experienced a ransomware attack? Yeah, look around, guys. That's crazy scary, right? That was almost everyone in the room. And I'm sure afterwards we say, okay, where are the holes? Let me try to fix it. I'll plug this thing in here. How many of you, after that ransomware attack, focused pretty heavily on making sure the firewall was accurate, protected, and up to date? Please all of you raise your hands again. There's like 7 people in the room. All right, so it's a big piece. So we really have to pay attention to what we're doing and what needs to be done, and making sure that we're looking at security holistically, right? Not just the firewall. One of the questions about DNS came up earlier. Really cool, try it at home, opendns.com, free account, sign up for it. Automatically will help you mitigate DDoS attacks. Tell your son not to tell his friends though, so he can keep doing it to them. But OpenDNS is a perfect example, right? And there's other groups like Umbrella, right, that are DNS type mitigators that don't just protect your site, right? Don't just protect your actual firewall, your connection to the internet. These are things that can help protect students from accidentally getting incorrect DNS queries or getting DDoS attacks, and this umbrella is able to then mitigate you to a different DNS server, to a different IP address, and can help do some of that. So definitely check it out. I had too much coffee this morning, and I went way too quick, and I know I still have 10 minutes left. So anything you guys want to talk about? I mean, I want to do a little bit of, and this is for you guys as well.
Could you speak to one thing that, I mean, everybody here is related to, really, it's nonprofit, their government.
Yeah.
There's something that you suggest, I think, funding, if this is a big issue. How I think a lot of people here would like to get more resources, but how do you get the money for
Cisco and affordable in the same sentence. That's a new one for me. That's a new one. It's not that bad anymore. It's not that bad. So we did. So in all seriousness, right? There are some things that we can do through E-rate, right? There are some things that E-rate doesn't allow. Certain firewalls are allowed. Certain firewall policies and licenses aren't. So it gets a little dicey. For a good example, the Meraki MX appliance is only 50% E-rateable. So only half of its features are considered E-rateable, which makes it a little challenging. One of the more inexpensive things you can do is MDM. Right? Most folks have to get it anyway. Most folks at this point, if you're managing more than, say 10 iPads, it makes sense to get MDM. Right? It makes sense to be able to make sure things are secure at a massive scale. I remember when one-to-one and laptop card initiatives and iPad card initiatives started coming out, we would line like a whole room, you guys have done this, right? A whole room of iPads, and you go like, turn this one, turn this one, turn this one, turn this one, and like you go back and you do it again, and you put a passcode on every single one. That's crazy people stuff. MDM fixes a lot of those things and makes sure that you can push out a security policy like all users must have a specific app installed, or all users must have a lock code installed, or all users must, et cetera, across the school. And if you're not using MDM for security, if you're only thinking of it like, oh, MDM is for pushing out apps and that's all it does, go back to your MDM manufacturer, or better yet, go to Meraki.com/OSM, and really look into what other features are in that MDM, what other things can that MDM do, and can integrate with other parts of your network. So to put my sales hat back on for just a quick second, one of the nice things about the Meraki ecosystem, and for those of you in the room that use it, you already know, our wireless, our firewall, our switching, our MDM is all part of one platform, and it automatically integrates with each other. So if I have a wireless policy that says something like, I'm going to rate limit Facebook and Netflix to a certain level, right? I can go into my MDM and say, if this is a teacher AD account, it's going to bypass that. Or if this is a jailbroken account, it's automatically going to put them in a different VLAN or a different policy or different firewall policy or something like that. And that integration is important because if it's difficult to do, you're not going to do it. Nobody in this room is going to do it. If you've got to read 1,000 books to get there, it's just too complicated. So Meraki and others out there, look for solutions that not only have those features, but you have the power to implement it, right? And you can go to a reseller if you want to pay the services involved, which is sometimes worth paying for. Don't get me wrong. If you're not comfortable doing it, there are folks out there that are, and they will charge you money, and you should pay them that money to get that stuff done. But there's a lot you can do on your own as well before that happens, right? So I recommend when you look at solutions, make sure there's solutions that you feel comfortable doing at least the basic level of security. Firmware is that same conversation, right? If you have a large network, or even a small network, and you haven't thought about updating firmware on your devices, go right now and go do that. Just as one more quick kind of aside in the video surveillance realm, how many people in this room use Axis video surveillance cameras? They're like the world's most popular video camera brand. And how many of you were also aware of the firmware issue that these guys had for a while, which has now been fixed, that exposed the cameras to the internet? You know, it was July of last year they announced it. There was a website you could go to, by the way, where you could pull up Axis cameras that were exposed to the internet, and there's still a few on there. You can go and see hallways and schools, and just click, they're being broadcasted to the internet. And basically what was happening, there's another site too that I can tell you, where you can go and see routers and other equipment that have default passwords on them. That website's amazing. There's so many people out there that never change the default password on their routers, which is like 101, right? So go and do that if you haven't done that yet. I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell you what that credit card scam website was, though. It's awesome. Card, great integration. Those guys are great. So in all seriousness, I think that piece, right, making sure that we have our firmware up to date, that we pay attention to security bulletins, that we sign up for the manufacturer's newsletters that we're connected to, right? So if you've got 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or 50 manufacturers in your environment, sign up to their newsletters and make sure every once in a while you scroll through and read them. We had a customer recently that I spoke to that had no idea, there might be some people in this room, about that Axis camera vulnerability, and they never updated their cameras. They just didn't think that their camera system would be a security vulnerability from an internet perspective, but it was. It's an internet-facing camera. It's an IP-enabled NVR. And when they saw it, they were like, holy cow, like, I can't believe I didn't know about this. And this was all over the website. It was blasted out. I was getting an email a week on it. But if you just kind of filter those things out and don't check them every once in a while, you don't know what you're missing. That's not a reason for me to say, like, you should read all my Cisco spam that I send you. But really, you should kind of scroll through things once in a while and maybe create keywords like security or bulletin or audit and make sure that you're seeing those things as they come in. Because it is important to do, and it's cheap and free. It's an easy thing to pay attention to. Subscribe to things like Network World or Security World and read those blogs every so often. And you don't have to study them, right? Spend 5 minutes in the morning just kind of scrolling through to see if there's any keywords in there that seem important to you. And those are inexpensive ways of doing it. And so is Cisco sometimes. Anyway.
So whenever Cisco discovers a security vulnerability on their site, they put out a bulletin that says, here is how to get your security update.
Yes.
Have you ever tried to actually get that security update? Because
No.
I'll tell you, it takes weeks.
No, I know it does. So this is sort of
Unbelievable.
it's one of the things that and this is a bit of a differentiator inside of Cisco for the Meraki platform. And those of you that have Meraki know, when new firmware is available or new security audits are available, it's automatically downloaded for you and staged, and you get an email that just says schedule. And you click it, and it launches you in a Meraki dashboard, and you literally just say, Saturday, 1 a.m., save. That's it. Right? So the Meraki ecosystem has made that very easy, and because we have this cloud managed capability. It's one of those things that in the beginning we had very mixed feelings about, right? This is the last thing I'll say, and we'll kind of close it out. But we had very mixed feelings originally about the concept of cloud networking. But one of the nice things about cloud networking is we get to see, and don't be creeped out by this, but we get to see every single piece of gear that we've ever sold, if it's online or not, and what firmware version it's running. And not much more than that, quite frankly. That's about as far as it goes, from our own data collection. But how many in this room use, I'll name all our competitors, right? Extreme, Juniper, HP, even Cisco, right? CLI-based, non-cloud managed switches. And what firmware version are they running? I don't know. Cisco doesn't know. HP doesn't. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what version you're running in your network. They can't see it. They're totally, unless it's an internet-facing service. We have no idea how many, when Cisco releases a bulletin and says, hey, we found this firmware version, we don't know how many people are affected by it. We don't know which customers are affected by it. We just have to tell everyone and hope that people are listening. One of the nice things about Meraki and cloud networking in general is because we can see that information, we know who to notify. We know who to call. I mean, we can say, hey, 45%, we can query it right now, 45% of the security vulnerabilities that are out there have been mitigated. Let's do another round of marketing and make sure that the rest of them get mitigated. Okay, 89% been mitigated. Let's just reach out to customers directly. So you give up a little bit of that privacy, truthfully. You give up a little bit of that privacy, but I mean, in trading for security, it's one of those things that, at least in the network and firmware world, maybe not on our webcams and our laptops and things like that, but in the network firmware world, it's important to make that trade-off. And that's one of the things that we're trying to bring to the table. And the industry in general is moving to this direction. You're going to see more and more companies talking about cloud managed services and security managed services and things like that, where they can help mitigate this stuff faster. Because as quickly as we can get more sophisticated, so do the attackers. And being one step ahead is getting more and more difficult to do. So you've got to be faster. If you can't be smarter, you just got to be faster. That's that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
I don't have any other questions.
Quick question regarding is there a better recognition for actual physical use of documents? Obviously, the project is is it a better process?
So the dashboard is good. So inside, and for those of you that are not familiar, so Meraki's got an ecosystem of about 6 different product lines. There's video cameras, wireless, and switching, and also firewalls, which uses the SourceFire intellectual property from Cisco. And whether it's the Meraki SourceFire clients or Cisco SourceFire clients or any other firewall out there, so long as they're a large enough company, and I'm big into small business, but when it comes to security, you want as much information as you can get, as much data as you can collect. As long as it's a decent named brand company, it's got a lot of endpoints out there, and you keep it up to date, and as much as everyone grows about subscription costs, they're important for a reason, even though they can be expensive. So make sure your subscriptions stay up to date, make sure you know when those renewals happen, and make sure there are not times where there isn't a subscription on those boxes. Because what does happen, we've seen happen a few times with customers, is they say like, oh man, my license expired in June 1st. I don't have budget until July 15th, so I'm just gonna wait. I'll just wait and leave the network open for 45 days, and just probably nothing will happen. What they don't realize is there's been an attack pinging you for 2 years, and then all of a sudden there's a 45-day window where it's like, oh, I can get through it. This is great. They didn't renew their license. Perfect. So be very aware of things like that. When your security licenses expire, when they need to be renewed, whether it's Meraki Firewall or anybody else out there. I think those are important. For you, you should get a Meraki Firewall. We'll talk about that later. If you guys have any other questions, if you want to see a demo of any of the security stuff we talked about, Security Center, which shows that retrospective malware, stop by the CISco booth. We've got the Spark board there too.